Well, hello, Susan, Primo, and Adam. Welcome, and thank you all for being part of our panel today as we kick off our Design Connections 2021 virtual event. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for
Thank
inviting
you.
us.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today's topic is one that I think has been on everybody's mind for quite a while, even before the pandemic hit. Thanks to developments in mobile technology, obviously more and more employees are working either full-time or part-time from home or other third places. And for our conversation today, I'd like for you all to share your thoughts on how you think this trend toward increased remote work is affecting the business of design firms, which is our theme of the conference this year, and how principals, members of leadership teams, and project teams can help ensure that people are collaborating and working together effectively, even if they're not occupying the same shared physical space. And then what some of those considerations people should be keeping in mind as they move forward. So as I mentioned previously, we were already seeing this shift towards working remotely in third places prior to COVID. So my first question for you all is, how well did this trend sort of prepare us for the lockdowns that we saw last year, and what did we learn in the process? Susan, would you like to go first?
Sure. So even before the pandemic, workplace designers were already professing and advocating that work can be done anywhere with the proper devices and tools. So with the global economy and clients, as well as worldwide offices and virtual connections with colleagues, it really prepared us to be agile and pivot and adapt quickly to the lockdown and working from home. And I think, work where you can be most effective is the most important thing, where you can really produce work, and it could be anywhere. And we always professed work throughout the building. It's not just at your desk. So, with the right tools and Wi-Fi, robust Wi-Fi, you can work almost anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Primo, did you want to follow up on that, or Adam?
Just to hop on what Susan mentioned, it has been available. Tech, devices, everything. I don't think that we didn't use Zoom and some of these programs to the degree. So there are, it's very one-way conversation. It's not as organic. And we'll talk about collaboration tools and things of that sort. But we were beginning to set up the firm so it could be more. Files, things of that sort are very difficult for companies to kind of move a lot of information on FTP sites and in the cloud. So we were in the midst of that change. And I think it was just sort of the nick of time, right? Because then all 45 designers were at their home in a week, and some of them had good product to work with. Some of them had old laptops that needed to be upgraded. So there was sort of that some of this stuff just isn't going to work. And most of the good equipment went to traveling designers. And now everybody was essentially traveling. So there's some things we've learned for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think I think the nature of how everything happened in March and April, I think it was just that startling moment of being forced to work from home, which is very different than the flexibility people were afforded prior to that. Mm-hmm. And to be really clear, it's very different working from home during a pandemic where you couldn't really go outside, you couldn't socialize, and it's still continued, and there's restrictions around that. But I think people have made incredible do and shown that even in this environment, you can be incredibly productive and people can be engaged. And, not always, obviously, there's always goods and bads. But as we take these lessons and move forward, and once we're back to whatever you want to call a new normal, it's going to be a very different experience. I think people will lean in a lot more on being able to work from anywhere. The tools have been here for years, right? As I think Susan and Primo both mentioned, it's now we're just suddenly accessing them in different ways. So it's now just more of a behavioral change. And by the way, for the last 11 months, our behavior has been forced to be changed. And we're not going to go back to, I guess, how we thought about things prior to this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the questions that just came to mind as you all were speaking, though, was as far as the impact that this has had on employees. I've read articles recently that have talked about how, you know, females, for example, women in the workplace have been disproportionately affected more so from the work from home model because of, you know, childcare responsibilities and things of that nature. Do you have any thoughts on that and, how, and what impact that has had on some of the female workers at your firms?
Oh, definitely. Especially, you know, folks with little kids and not having childcare has really affected focus time and you know you have to tend to family first and you know to be able to focus and not be distracted and multitasking gets really difficult, especially in meetings and you never know when your child is going to need something, especially when you're multitasking education and you know studying at home, and it's just really difficult to create that balance. But having that scheduled time for meetings when you can focus and have someone else watch your child or have them have focus time in school, remote school is really important, but balancing the two gets really convoluted and complex.
Mm.
So if you don't have a spouse, you know, to help with that task, it gets even more complicated as, you know, a single parent.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it really it daylighted how school became sort of a place for them to go when they were working. They couldn't go to school, so you had everybody. I mean, I have several parents, people with designers with kids, and all of a sudden it was like, you know, four people in the house, or two people, two little kids and two adults, and it was amazing to watch how that how internally organizational wise they had to, like, who was watching it this hour, right, who was watching their child, and then um you know, there's some great things that came about it because there's a lot more to, you know, together. So actually it's kind of led us to develop new typologies, so when we return to work, some of these things have been quite, you know, there's just, we should have sometimes our children come to work, but we need a place for that to occur. So it's inventing sort of the new, you know, what will workplace be? We sort of enjoy this time together. Should we be thinking about it as we return to work? And it has led to that, like
Mm.
families, whether they're adult or small children, we should have a place for them to come when we're working because it just makes sense. You're going to pick up your kid. Do I have to go back home? No, we'll just come to the office for a few, you know, for whatever the time period is, and have a space dedicated to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, speaking of the way things will look as we return to work, Adam, I think you mentioned in a previous comment that you know, working from home is a different under a pandemic than it might be, you know, moving forward. So, in what ways do you think COVID has changed the way that we're working remotely today, and what's different
Yeah.
now? What's going to be different as we look ahead?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it just got highlighted in the last question, which is, you know, we're two working parents and we have two little girls. Fortunate to have a 1 and 4 year old. I've spent an incredible amount of time, and I would never change that for the world. But it is balancing, right? So we've been forced to think through how do you manage a family and your job and life all in the same space. And I think you're going to take those lessons and those learnings and as you move forward. And I think it maps back very much to just when you think about flexible, it's not, you know, the flexibility to go into the office or not. It's about flexible of, you know, what hours do you work, right? So like my hours are not 9 to 5 now. You know, I'll typically work maybe 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., be offline with the family. You know, we'll kind of rotate and then be online during certain hours and then work later. So I think that type of schedule is only afforded by, you know, if you're closer to home in that environment, because you're not going to spend the time commuting back and forth, back and forth. So I think when you think about remote work, it's actually going to creep into this notion of what is your daily schedule? When are you on? When are you off? In a lot of ways, we should all already be solving for that when quite literally the four of us are all in 4 different time zones. How do we account for that? And what are the core hours when we're all together as an organization? And I know I can reach you, you know, regardless of where you are.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Primo or Susan, you want to add on to that at all?
Well, I think, that this is again, sort of the highlight of this is that we've had this time and there are core hours and I work like you guys. I mean, I'm working in the Middle East, I'm working in Asia, and I'm working in Portland. I mean, it's just like, and Detroit. So this like every single one, there is no core time. There is the time that the client's available and you sort of like switch I'm getting up at 4:30 today because I have an 8 o'clock call in Detroit. There's nothing I can do about that. That's when that team's going to meet and I need to avail myself. So this work-life balance has really been tested, right? I mean, and it already had sort of like swayed that way. We do mostly West Coast work, and companies do go way past 5 or 6 into the evening hours. Some engineers work best at 10 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and you just make the space a 24/7, 365 facility. It's now expanded into the home office, there'd be great if there were like Starbucks or coffee shops that were open 24/7, because you'd probably see a lot of people out there, because I work like you guys probably at 10 or 11. Sometimes that's when the quiet time is, and you can begin focusing. So we begin developing these patterns and behaviors that we were not necessarily doing at the pace and at the level we're doing it now. We have been in lockdown for a year, literally a year, almost 10, 11 months. And we're learning the shorthands. We're learning what some technology avails us and some doesn't. Design collaboration is really being tested, because yes, you can use a Miro board, you can use this tech, but it still is not very, it's a very transactional, very kind of one-way directional thing. I mean, you can share screens, you can do things, but it's not as I'm in the room sketching on a piece of paper, pushing it across in front of somebody and getting a visceral response. That's the thing that's probably most missed in design firms.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. The face-to-face collaboration is and the serendipitous meetings, that you don't plan, and you can overhear conversations and just run into people and talk about solving problems together. I think that's what a lot of folks miss. But there are great tools like Mural, and definitely folks are, we haven't missed a beat, right? Because we are producing great design and delivering and, making our deadlines. So I think it's just a different work behavior, but, we definitely see a work and life kind of blending. And so you have to be able to separate sometimes, work is at a certain time, and then really make sure you carve in some rejuvenation time, and to refuel. But I think even prior, my previous organization, we worked with a lot of global clients, and so sometimes we were doing presentations from 6 to 9 o'clock in the evening, and it gets into your personal life, and usually that's dinner time, and so you have to rethink when dinner time is with your family, and just kind of reorganize your day and really trying to create balance. And you do have to put a stop to work and just get off all devices and be able to really engage with your family. So I think it's really having some rigor in your schedule to create that balance.
Sure. Do you all see the shifts in people's schedules as in terms of productivity? Are employees more or less productive? Do you have kind of data to support what you're seeing?
Yeah, just quickly, we do surveys on our team to just gauge in their level of productivity, and we're at our core, we're a technology company supporting the real estate industry and kind of layering in design in terms of how to optimize that space. And so we do have a lot of clients, and we help operate their spaces from a service and technology perspective. So we do track the productivity of them with surveys as well. And it hasn't changed much. In fact, we've seen a little bit of an uptick in general, just from what we're seeing across hundreds of data points. But it's still anecdotal at that level. Now the question of productivity versus employee satisfaction, those don't always go in tandem. And so to that point of always being on it's, there's that notion of like, where do those start and stop? But I think anecdotally, to the point of now, quantitatively, you can start to say, yes, productivity hasn't changed significantly, if not gotten better over the last year. Now, how does that impact overall employee happiness and satisfaction? Slightly different question.
Right. And I also think, productivity really depends on each individual and their persona, and their engagement with work versus, lifestyle. And I think environmental is super important because, like we talked about with some women and being mothers and being able to balance children, especially folks that, are single parents, it's very hard to balance both of that, doing it alone. So I think really having the environmental impacts really makes a difference on productivity and just being super organized. But having meaning to work is really important. So, telling your especially managers and leaders, just telling their folks that they're appreciated can boost meaning for someone to really be more productive as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think kind of the thing that is, and it's not just our design firms, it's sort of companies that we work with right now, is the erosion of culture. And because we have ways to kind of measure performance, but you're right, the happiness factor is kind of like, it's they're probably working longer, it's just because there is a lot of distraction. Before, maybe distraction was probably a good part of the day, just so you didn't get so hyper tunnel vision and you were able to balance your day. And they're thinking now it's just like, well, shit, I'm on this drawing for like X amount of hours and I'm just going to stay in it because, well, I don't have any friends that I can go see. I could watch every Netflix thing I could possibly watch. I'm just going to do this. So that discipline and rigor and sort of balancing, recalibrating our lives is kind of like been the test. Is how are we? Is this something we want to do for the next couple of years, or are we going to have a clamoring to get back in the office? We're seeing and everybody's sort of got their own take on it, right? Every company has put out their surveys, and it's at 2 or 3 days a week. Is it 100% unassigned? Is it like we're going to still leave some of these things intact so it's not so the environment is not changed dramatically, because that also has a huge effect on the psychology of coming back to work. This is still yet to be seen, is what right? We're still in the middle of it, where no one has been allowed to go back to the office. California is still shut down.
Right.
We've not been able to. People go to the office to go pick up their samples, but they don't go in there and collaborate with their colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what types of tools and processes or maybe policies need to be in place to ensure successful remote work? Either now or when people do go back to the office, obviously the collaboration is going to look a little different. So, what do you see as being some of those things that need to be put in place to kind of help with collaboration right now?
Yeah, from a tools perspective, I think just supporting individual productivity, starting there. We think the thing that we see people wanting the most of, just very practically, is like a great chair, like an office-oriented chair, and then a monitor, right? Those are the things you typically don't have at home, and like those are two great wins. And so like not necessarily geared towards team, but geared towards individual, and then how that affects team and team productivity. Another thing that we did on our side, we had a team call this morning, but like everyone had a $750 budget or an oriented amount. They could spend it on whatever that they defined as their productivity. And you saw everything from, as like the chair to the monitor to subscription to Audible to an Apple Watch. It's very interesting how people define their productivity and, what will enhance their at-home experience. Doesn't quite get to the online tool component, but I think just starting from first and foremost, that personalization of work and what helps drive that individual that then can lead to a kind of the collaborative components.
Definitely, healthy and comfort is very important to folks, and especially in productivity. So, proper ergonomics, but having all the tools, and definitely a lot of the virtual tools are really important, like Mural and Teams and Slack, Jamboard, Google Meet, just
Mhm.
name it, it's out there. So, but what's really important is the leadership and organizations with facilities and HR and IT to really create policies that enable teams to collaborate virtually, and having all the equipment as well as the bandwidth they need to connect and be successful in collaborating virtually. But I think, when we get back to the office in the future, there's going to be somewhat of a hybrid, where, we do go, there are great spaces for brainstorming and connection, but how do we create equity with folks that are remote? So there will be folks that are, you know, face to face and in the office, but then what happens? How do we get the folks that are remote equity in that same room, and so that they are participating and engaged in the collaboration? Because I think we will have a hybrid of folks being remote as well as in the office.
Right.
Yeah, I would say we've really tried hard to keep some of the ritualistic events like our Christmas party routine that is based more on social stuff. There's like a virtual lunch hour that people go plug into. So trying to keep some of the stuff that, the kitchen in the office was good at sort of infusing culture remain the same. And you can achieve that. You're not in the same room, but you can kind of turn on a Zoom channel and everybody can be in there. For Christmas this year, we usually, rent a great place and have a DJ and do all this. We hired a chef and we sent ingredients to everybody and we all cooked the same meal. Granted, mine turned out terrible or somebody, but it was kind of a fun thing, right? It's like
Right.
watch us all try to, stir eggs and bake it and make a cocktail. And then I've been doing this. I've been doing these DJ things where I'll just get a bunch of things off the YouTube thing and create a whole dance list and then turn on the screen. So as much as we can get to some of that, what makes the firm unique or the cultures thrive, because tech's going to be tech, right? And it's going to get better. And I always say it's at this level right now, and you watch my son play a multiplayer game with headphones on, there's no kids in the room. They're distributed and they do great. So there's going to be a generation that's going to just love this and it's going to be second nature to them.
Yeah.
But then you see the swing and the balance, like they need to wear their Red Wing shoes and really look hip. I mean, there's this analog, go to the barbershops, which I think is the funny thing. There's always a balancing, right? You're in the virtual world for 8 or 10 hours a day. You need to have this analog world that is, mechanical, visceral workshop. So we put these things in workplaces now, right? I mean, we make part of this because we know how deep you can go down the rabbit hole when you're online. You need to bring them back out. And that's what the workplace was great for, right?
Mhm.
It was where social activity took place. It's where that nuanced conversation, no problem with equality because you were there. You'd go work part,
Right.
you'd come in, you'd have that ability to do that. So we need to find back, a way to do that. If we have to stay, if lockdown happens again and we go another 6 months and we can never meet our colleagues and it's going to be our bubble that our friends are in, that's going to be a very different world. It's not going to be that way all the time, but we're still take time to ease out of it.
Yeah. And I want to get back to the conversation about how this will impact the design of the workplace. But before we do so, what do you all see as being some of the main obstacles to effective collaboration in the digital age? I mean, I think we've talked about some of the tools and things that kind of enable that, but what do you see as being some of the challenges to that, and how do you overcome those those challenges to effectively collaborating?
I think sometimes it's behavior of the folks, not focused or being in the moment, and they're multitasking, and you can see someone, checking their phone and not really listening or engaged. So, it's definitely, folks that don't turn on their camera, hard to know if they're really engaged in the conversation, or are they really part of the brainstorming session? So that gets a little difficult, but encouraging folks to really be in the moment, and because I mean, balancing that again, not like having rigor to not pick up the phone, but I mean, it was the same in-person meetings where people are not listening to a speaker and they're on their phones. I think it's rude. So I think it's really having respect for people you're engaging with and being connected to them.
Mhm. Yeah, Adam or Primo, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean,
go
I
for it,
agree.
Primo.
I think that was
Standoff there.
always, yeah, it's true, Susan. I mean, there is that tendency for people to just sort of like do something and they say, oh, I'm listening. Well, you're not even looking at me. And I mean, I've had this in meetings where I'm doing a pitch and there's somebody who's supposed to be interviewing me nose down in their laptop, not even really paying attention to the deck that we just put together. So there's certainly, I would say, rules of engagement that need to be honored. And when you're in a room, be present, be in that moment. And I think you're right. I think we should impose rules that put your devices away and let's just kind of have some, put your focus time in. And I think, to me, that's something that's been lacking, and we've been wanting to make better for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, because it just seems very easy for someone to say, oh no, I'm listening, but you're not really engaged. You're not in the moment. So I think that's interesting comment.
Yeah, that's a really, really good comment too. And I agree, Susan. This isn't necessarily a technological or remote issue. It's just like a universal rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And kind of how, societally everything's more on demand and always accessible, and how does that merge with work? And so I think universally we're trying to solve for that and be present, as you said, and may not even be related to, we're going to just have different solutions to solve for it in this environment as opposed to in person, but systemically the
Yeah.
same issue.
Yeah, that's good points. So getting back to the workplace itself, the design of the workplace. So what impact has remote work and collaboration had on the design of the office? I know Susan and Primo, you mentioned your firms are closed, but I guess do you anticipate any changes being made to either the size of your the space, the function, or the layout of your studios? And in what ways do you think that might play out in the design of the physical workspace itself?
You go first, Susan. We haven't come back. We've thought about
So
it.
yeah, I mean, we haven't gone back, and the office is closed, but if you have to go in for certain equipment or tools, you can go in. But I think we have a team that's beta testing a hybrid office, and we are working with clients to reimagine their workplace by July 2021 or fall of 2021. So we are beta testing and creating hybrid spaces where it's a little more hospitality driven, but also that has occupancy analytics and a smart building. Healthy, safe, and smart buildings are key, right? Folks aren't going to want to go in unless they know it's safe. And having smart devices that help who is in, who is not in, reservation systems, user control for thermal comfort, reservation, so forth. And I think we are definitely testing those types of tools, as well as creating spaces where serendipitous meetings can happen, as well as more meetings and hospitality driven features, amenities, and places that you need to get to that's different from home, that really enable collaboration and getting engaged with your teams. So really looking for different space types that really enable productive work as well. So, we're testing all of those things right now.
Mhm.
And I would mention that the design office is very different than a client's office, right? I mean, we're space heavy demand. We need layoff space. We need pin-up areas. We need a lot of things that are better handled in the workplace that is a design office, a studio.
Mhm.
What was clear to us is the whole social aspect of workplace, because you work a lot of hours and you need to go take breaks, and those moments of serendipity or just talking with your colleague in a casual manner by the water cooler or whatever, the refrigerator, those are missing. Those little things that are important to your daily routine are missing. We know that it'll be great for collaboration, but that collaborations are going to be different, right? We're going to feel very, very apprehensive about entering the same space or room, looking at samples, touching samples, until there'll be protocols initially, and until everything is sort of kind of settled down a bit. But I think the use model is in total question. Is it just a big library?
Mhm.
Samples, because not everybody can afford. I mean, we're not going to, we don't want to send 15 samples out when it could be in one place. There was an economy, and there's something good about having it go to one space. But it's very much the model's going to be challenged, because we don't know that we can all be in the same area. Got to upgrade your mechanical equipment, got disinfecting lights. You got to do a bunch of stuff just to kind of make the space habitable, make people feel safe. And that stuff is still very much in the early stages. Not everybody can afford to do it either.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Adam, do you have clients that are asking for particular things, or what are you seeing from those folks as far as the people that are getting back to work, businesses that are reopening? What can you speak to as far as that goes?
Yeah, we build a lot of the technologies that Susan referenced, pretty robust around putting the experience in the user's hands, and not just the point of contact or office manager, but every single person that walks through an office building or a residential building for that matter as well, and be able to make reservations, unlock doors, do all of the things that really a modern real estate experience should have and be integrated into the design and day to day. Right now, from a reservation is very important right now, for especially if there's any shared spaces, and that's largely happening in residential, multifamily residential, where you need a way to limit capacity, kind of know when people were in so you can do a cleaning procedure. And I think in the office world, we're seeing very little usage across a lot of markets, and you really don't need a lot of these systems in place when you just have a handful of people on a floor or in an entire building. So I think it remains to be seen. I think people are cautiously waiting and choosing what's best. You're doing a risk reward like everything else, and if the risk isn't there, there's not enough of a benefit to go in. Then people aren't, and they should choose not to. It's a very much company decision. Let alone it could be a societal. Depending on the market with lockdowns. So you may not even have that choice. So I think everyone's kind of still waiting and leaning in on what their current experience is, and being just kind of thinking first and foremost around. I think it's been nice from an employer perspective, honestly, is thinking through what's for the benefit of each individual person, right? And let's start there, and then we'll let other things fall from that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, as we kind of wind down our conversation here, I was hoping you all could offer maybe some closing thoughts as far as looking at the short term and the long term, as far as remote work and collaboration go. Where do you think things might be headed? Are we going to see an increase in remote workers? Maybe the impact on office office space or how people work. Any kind of concluding thoughts on our topic, or anything that we've discussed so far as far as working effectively together, even when we're not in the same space?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think, and I mentioned this before, I think we've sort of realized what's important to us, and it sort of daylighted a lot of things that workplace from home should be a choice. That wasn't necessarily a choice for some companies, It was very hierarchical, a little bit older management style. You know, you can see it in other countries where, you know, even agile work wasn't accepted. You had to be in your, I mean, I work in Spain a lot, I teach in Madrid, and I would go to see all these banking companies, and the guys, managers, everybody would want their team to sit in their area, right? It's like, I'm not going to go work down in the kitchen because my manager wants me there. So there's levels of uptake of agile work. We're very, very liberal, and we test a lot of ideas in the West Coast, and so agile work has always been there. The level of, you know, acceptance of working from home, maybe there was, you know, frowned upon, but if an engineer or somebody needed to do some heads down work and they did that, I don't think anybody would have a problem. But it's just so wide scale, right? And we just kind of see the effect of that is like, well, we're tired of being home. You know, I don't have a big study to go to. I have my apartment in the corner, and I'm sick of going to that corner. So we're gonna recalibrate from this, learn some lessons, and it will be a choice. And if we go to 100% unassigned, which not everybody is doing, but a lot of people are doing unassigned, what does that mean to culture if you don't have a desk when you go back there and it's a place that you check in every day? Is that something we're going to be? Is that going to be something exciting to go back to? So we're still very much in the learning stages of what the overall impact of this is. And you can see other countries that came off of COVID earlier in Asia went right back to the office, didn't change a thing. And this is maybe the third epidemic or something of this sort that has hit their country. So in America, we look at it and we're very kind of holistic about it, and different parts of the country obviously responded differently. That's why we're in shape we are right now. So it's daylighted some things. We're going to adjust. We'll be fast to move to it, and we'll see. I mean, it's gonna make us better. It's gonna make balance in life a little better. That's one thing I think will come out of it. We enjoy spending time with our families. We enjoy spending time in different places, and choice has always been something I felt was important in the workplace. This has really sort of cemented that choice. We can work from home.
Definitely. I think for DLR Group, it's no boundaries in building teams. It doesn't matter where a team member's located, and you can, you know, it's dispersed workforce. We can bring talent from Omaha or, you know, from Portland and Los Angeles, and you can have teams from everywhere now. And it's really about the talent pool and, you know, the skill set. So it's not, you don't have to worry that they're in that same location as the project, which I think is really great. There's just more, you know, flexibility in creating your teams.
Yeah, and I agree. I think out of this, and I think it piggybacks on both of those points, which is universally, if not now, in the very near term, the next couple of years, we will almost exclusively, at least in the United States, it's hard for me to speak culturally because I think being in Europe as I am now, it is different. And so I think there's a behavioral component, but I think we'll take a remote first approach, which is solving for the assumption that everyone is remote, regardless if they're in the office or not, and creating, and it was talked about earlier, that kind of universal experience that I can experience the company, the organization, regardless if I live in the city in which the headquarters is, but I'm universally a part of a team, regardless of, you know, if I'm happen to be based there. And so I think that has a lot of implications for the physical space, and it doesn't mean or take away from the notion of in-person engagement. And it's just, we have to rethink it, right? We have to rethink it. If I know you're not going to be there every day from 9 to 5, and by the way, did I want to be there every day 9 to 5? Not really. I don't think, you know, most people didn't. So like, why are we jamming this in when we have all of these new tools at our disposal? The office really is going to take more hospitality at the end of the day, more be of a intentionally driven interaction where you all come in at certain times, regardless if you're in Omaha, Hawaii, you'll come in once a quarter, once a month, and you're going to have a great time and a great experience. And you know what? Susan and Primo are going to design incredible places for that to all happen. And you know, at the end of the day, you're going to value the office far more than you ever did right now. It's going to look different. It's probably going to be smaller, no question, but it's
Mhm.
going to be a better experience. So I think
Yeah.
as an employer, employee, everyone, we should universally be excited how we come out of this and where it takes us
Yeah.
over the next few years.
Definitely. I mean, you're going to the office for some kind of great experience and some reward.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
absolutely.
I'm 100% on board with that. It is hyper focused, the importance of it, and those interactions and will be much more meaningful. I mean, we were trying to do that anyway.
Mhm.
And it's, to me, it's, I do like the distributed work. I do like being able to hire talent. And in my office, you say, well, we have to be in one place. I go, no, we don't. I could be in LA. You can be, and we're doing just fine, right?
Yeah,
When
and
you
see,
work
Primo
doing
has
that
a
design.
tan
Yeah.
in
And I've got a
Hawaii.
tan. I've got a tan. Well, yeah.
Looks
So
good, Primo.
fortunately, my son wanted to. He's going to college next year. So one of the schools we had to visit was University of Hawaii. I just
Oh,
said,
good
you know what?
excuse.
It was just so bad going back to California. I go, I might as well just stay here
Yeah.
Mhm.
and working earlier. But then at 3 o'clock when everybody's shutting down, I can go to the beach.
It's
A lot of
Great.
Californians are doing, Susan. A lot of Californians are here. I'm not the only
I
one.
know.
Somebody discovered this like 7 months ago. I wish I would have figured that out.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I love it. It's one of the benefits of being able to work anywhere, right? You know, Hawaii,
Mhm.
why
Yeah.
not? Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those are great points. I love the optimism, and yeah, I think you all are right. I totally agree. I mean that the workplace is going to be just a much different but better and exciting experience for all, and it's going to be interesting for sure to see how this all plays out in the coming months and years. But Susan, Primo, Adam, thank you again so much for offering your insights and perspectives in this important topic and being part of the discussion today. We really appreciate you being part of the Design Connections experience. So thanks again.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, take care.